Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Join us as we explore Tolkien and all the ages of Middle-earth with your hosts from theonering.com, Jonathan Watson and Michael Grumbine.
Merry Christmas, everybody. I think I'm allowed to say that now. It is officially after Thanksgiving here.
Happy Advent, everybody.
Now, we have this every year, don't we? Michael doesn't really celebrate Christmas. You don't put up a Christmas tree until like the 24th of December, right?
We do it the last week, but yes, and we did. In fact, that's what this morning was spent doing, was picking out a Christmas tree, and we just keep it alive. We set it up in the backyard without decorations, just keep the tree alive, because I can't go the last week to get it. Because
the Christmas trees, you get Charlie Brown Christmas trees in.
They're so picked over, you get a terrible tree. And then also we have trees from the school that my kids go to. They sell trees, so we buy one.
Oh,
so we pick it up and we keep it alive. So we have this like pine tree that just pops up in our backyard for 2 weeks every Christmas.
People are like, you usually want to start it smaller. It doesn't work if you just stick it on the ground.
Exactly.
Wow. Well, yeah. Merry Christmas, and also Merry Beardvember.
That's right.
December. Michael and I have my kids asked me to grow a beard. I haven't done it in like 10 years, and in that time they've made me go gray. Sadly, Michael is older than me, but somehow has far less gray than I do. I don't know how that works out.
Well, not my beard. So it turns out my beard's like a week behind yours, maybe 2 weeks. But it comes in blonde and gray. So yeah. Anyway, I don't do mustaches. That's the 70s, which are the second most morally corrupt decade of the last millennia. So
because of the mustache, you have something really going hard against the mustache. Wait, how about a mustache and a beard?
Not because of the mustache.
Because if you just do the beard, okay, I know we're diving hard into the facial hair talk, but if you just do a beard, you become Amish. That's the problem.
That's right. Especially if it's a neck beard. Neck beards are wrong.
So, but maybe I'll cut this off. I'll go with the goatee, and then I will actually cut it off with a nice mustache, just to close off the beard experiment.
Just to watch me twitch as we do our.
Yeah, maybe next week it'll be the goatee, and the week after that it'll be the mustache, and then I'll be back to my baby face, clean shaven self. Not baby face. I'm getting too old for that. All right, everybody. Thanks. Welcome. Boy, that was quite the intro. We're talking the second half of Chapter 5 of The Hobbit, Riddles in the Dark, right after Bilbo says, "What have I got in my pocket?" Or is that the right phrase? What have I got in my pocket?
What have I got in my pocket? Yep.
No. Okay, good. I'm just making sure. No, I almost said, "What have I got in my pockets?" Which doesn't. It's not.
That's another person.
But it's close. So thanks everybody. We're going to have an extended podcast today. If you want to get that, go to theonering.com/member or theonering.com/Patreon. It's $4 a month. You get the extended podcast. You get the Discord chat. I'm thinking about opening it up to everybody. Is that a bad thing? Would our current members be like,
what could go wrong?
Oh man.
Open to the public.
I've had open forums before, and that's you're right. That's a Oh, dang it.
I would say I would vote no. I would vote.
Yeah. Okay.
That
sorry,
people,
freeloaders.
My experience with Discord channels is that it's better. It's better if people want to be there and they have some skin in the game and be there.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Than not.
So if you want to join the Discord chat, we've been a little quiet lately. We aren't a huge group, but we're a fun group. It's and actually the most fun you'll have is if you join us on December 30th for our Monday evening chat. We'll post the Zoom link in Discord because Discord's video is kind of wonky. Zoom does a much better job with it. If you have multiple people, 10, 12, 15, 20 people. And it'll be 9 p.m. Eastern. So if y'all can join us, become a member. And it's free for the first month. So look, it's something you can do without any skin in the game. Anyway, sorry, I digress. We're going to talk The Hobbit. We're going to talk Chapter 5 of The Hobbit. Oh, and in our extended podcast, real fast, we're going to talk about something about Bilbo and becoming an adventurer. I had a question that popped up, and I don't want to reveal it to Michael yet because getting his Insta thoughts is way better than having him think about it.
It doesn't help you. I still talk for an interminable amount of time, no matter whether it's off the cuff or not.
That's a good point. And I thought we could also talk our War of the Rohirrim predictions since it's coming out a week from the day we're recording it. Essentially,
I can tell already.
Yeah.
This is going to be my movie of the decade.
So we'll have an episode where we do talk about it. We're not going to be able to do it next week because we record on Friday and it's coming out on Friday, and so we don't have time to see it. And then so we'll talk about it 2 episodes from now. And then guys, I have a question for you. Michael needs a good lapel mic. His current situation doesn't allow for a big old mic like this here. So if you have a suggestion for a lapel mic, post it in the comments below on YouTube. Send me an email, jonathan@theonering.com. Post it in our Discord if you're a chat, or you can click the freeloader link. You can access our freeloader Discord channels, which are still fun. And we can talk about War of the Rohirrim there too. All right, everybody. We're going to get into chapter 5.
Chapter 5, Riddles in the Dark.
Episode 14, number 125 of Exploring Tolkien. But first, we have our
Hobbit facts.
Okay, did you know that Tolkien was not happy with the illustrations drawn for many of the translations for The Hobbit? So, in a 1963 letter to Allen and Unwin, his publishers, he wrote this: Gollum should not be made a monster, as he is practically by all other illustrators in disregard of the text. So he was kind of annoyed.
He was a little annoyed.
Yeah, by the folks who are deciding what Gollum looked like. And this was after he had already made the change to like the Gollum, like adding Gollum was a small and slimy creature in chapter 5. So what they were doing was kind of weird. Here's some of the illustrations that he was probably thinking about. And thanks to Fra in our Discord who brought these up at one point. I think I might have shown these in another episode. But here you go. There he is. I don't know what's up with the hat in this picture. Kind of unique, kind of interesting.
Yeah,
kind of Norse with a dragon front right there in the boat. Kind of weird.
Yes,
not too bad. But here's where it starts going off the rails. There's the Frog Hobbit, and I think we talked about this one. We're like, oh, how does that? But look at Bilbo. He is tiny. The Hobbit is 30 times his size, or the Gollum is 30 times his size here. So clearly in disregard of the text. And then here's another one, another Frog Hobbit. And let's remember, when Tolkien wrote this, Gollum was not a former halfling at this point.
Do you mean Frog Gollum? You said Frog Hobbit twice.
Oh, sorry. Well, he is a Frog Hobbit because theoretically in Lord of the Rings. But yes, Frog Gollum. Sorry. Weird. Very weird. And very large again. Very large.
It is interesting because it makes you wonder what are people thinking when they do this? Like, what in the text makes them think of Gollum that way? It talks, like Tolkien says, it talks about him as a small, mean creature. So he and in these cases he's much larger than. Maybe what they're thinking is it's a creature that's lived underground forever, so it wouldn't look like creatures above ground. It would look more like something like some cave dweller. Amphibian or fish or something.
And he talks, he kills orcs, so he's not exactly a weak character either. So if that's what he does, then maybe what it is. But you have to remember, he wore a ring, so I don't know how you would get this character to wear a ring exactly either. This
it's got very thin claws, right?
I guess.
That one's pretty crazy. Oh,
we have okay, this is going to date me. If any of you German folks know, there was was it a kids show and a book called Der Räuber Hotzenplotz? It was in Germany. It was the robber Hotzenplotz, and he was this bearded guy who looked kind of like this here. But man, what is up with this Gollum? But he has flipper legs too, and Bilbo's got a nice tall gnomish hat here. Not exactly small and slimy either.
I have never seen Gollum with a beard. That is interesting.
That's why we're going for this month.
Yeah,
the anti-Gollum beard.
That's us.
And then this one, is he a walrus? Like, that's the weirdest thing ever. Now here he doesn't have ability to wear
eyes, I think, right?
Right. Well, you mean this part right here?
Yeah, I think they're protruding eyes. That it talks about his eyes as protruding in the text once.
Yeah. Okay.
And so they took it to 11.
I guess that's really weird. That is so odd.
Yeah, that's very. And where was this one from?
I don't know. Fra posted these here in our chat in Discord. So I don't have the links to where it is, but yeah, this is, I don't remember. I don't have it, but weird. So anyway, yes.
Yeah.
Gollum, as he said in December 12th, 1963, Gollum should not be made a monster, as he is practically by all other illustrators in disregard of the text. And so when they say, Tolkien said, and a lot of people who like to rewrite Tolkien say, but Tolkien said there are other minds and hands. He still had a baseline of what things should be. And so
exactly,
I think we see that in Christopher Tolkien's reaction to The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And he, said they've made it just an action movie for 13-year-old boys, and they got rid of all of the nuance in it. Right? Not that he was 100% right, but I think his attitude probably speaks to what Tolkien's attitude would have been to much of the renditions of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And I have a distinct feeling The Rings of Power would not exactly be on his nice list this Christmas. So
that's probably true.
All right. Let's get into chapter 5, Riddles in the Dark. Michael, we ended last week on Bilbo saying, "What have I got in my pocket?" Where does the rest of this chapter take us? Give us a quick overview of where we are.
Okay, so roughly the rest of this chapter can be divided into 3 parts. We have the end of the riddle game itself as part 1, where the final riddle, which isn't a real riddle, though we have more to say about that, but the final riddle is given and failed by Gollum, and then Gollum goes and tries to find, has decided to, instead of leading Bilbo out as promised, he's decided that he's going to go kill Bilbo by getting the ring and avoiding Bilbo's nasty sword. So that's kind of one block. Then, of course, he doesn't find the ring. Mm-hmm. He gets suspicious. He suspects what's happened and guesses it and comes after Bilbo. Bilbo puts the ring on accidentally or unintentionally. Not accidentally, but unintentionally turning invisible. And then the second part, so the second part of this latter half is Gollum coming after Bilbo becoming invisible, and then following Gollum as Gollum goes up towards the surface, thinking Bilbo has fled that way. And then the conversations that happened there. And ending with Bilbo deciding not to kill Gollum and leaping over him. And then the last part of the chapter is a few pages of Bilbo getting himself back to the surface, to the back door, and navigating the guards, the goblin guards that are there, and finally escaping from the mountain out the back door. So those are the three general stages of this last part of the chapter.
And we talked last week about how the final question isn't really a riddle, but yes. Gollum does say, "You must ask us another question," and so Bilbo does, and so it's kind of his way out. But in thinking about the riddle game, as we close this part of the chapter down, and reading through the annotated Hobbit, which if you don't have it yet, there's a link below in the show notes and in the YouTube video here, where to get it. It has tons of information on the right-hand side. And one thing that always stuck with me was like, why is this riddle game almost sacred? Is that the right word? It is established as there are rules around it that everybody must hold true, and they hold it in high esteem.
Right.
And why is that? And there's an answer in there. I just thought, like, is that something that struck you, Michael? It's like, what, like, we don't have in our culture this, riddles are this established back and forth that we must hold true the actual rules of the riddle game. And it's sort of foreign to us.
So my thoughts were around, I didn't delve deep into the riddle game, although I did, from the annotated version of The Hobbit, it does point out that something that was kind of cool, which was that there are a couple of examples in Old Norse literature of riddle games. The quote unquote greatest, the two greatest supposedly of them, end in the same riddle, which is a non-riddle, which is Odin asking a question about what he said to his son Baldur as he brought Baldur's body to the pyre, and in both cases, Odin's asking as part of a riddle. He's asking a question that only he has the answer to. And it's not really a riddle; it's a non-riddle. And this is in the Lay of Vafthrudnir, and is the prime example. So it's a interesting. I mean, Tolkien's clearly tapping into an old tradition. The question about the rules of the riddle game I found fascinating. Were you going to bring up the older 1937 version of how the story went? Because it gives a little more about that sacredness of the riddle game than the published version that we all read.
Yeah, I think it's valid to bring that up. And just so you guys know, next week we're going to go over the original chapter and compare it to the new chapter. Because
okay, well,
remember,
we can hold off on that then.
Okay, all right. Okay, one of the quotes I think that where in the annotated Hobbit that brought up is this regarding riddles. The riddling tradition is tested in did I get that right? Did I write that right down? In any case, in Anglo-Saxon times, by the appearance of nearly 100 Anglo-Saxon riddles in the Exeter Book, one of the 4 great surviving collections of Anglo-Saxon poetry. It was compiled by Leoric, the Bishop of Exeter, sometime before his death in 1072. While Tolkien's riddles are generally much shorter than those Exeter books, many of them rhyme, while the Exeter riddles do not. And so it was established. There was a thing. It wasn't something Tolkien made up. He had seen this in his studies, and since he was a student of that time period of the Anglo-Saxon and Norse and that general realm right there in Northern Europe, this was something that he found, write what you know, and so he knew this and he put it in the book.
Yep, it's pretty cool. I never got to see the Exeter book. I knew about it. I learned about it when I was doing my graduate work in medieval history. It's apparently in the Exeter Cathedral now. But I'm excited. They're gonna put it on display next year. I found out. I looked it up when these after reading this had come from the Exeter book.
Cool.
That tradition. So anyway, if I find myself in England next year, it'll be I'll definitely stop by the Exeter Cathedral where it's going to be on display.
I would be curious to see if in the Exeter book, if there is a question like, what have I got in my pocket? Somewhere in there, because that does, right? Because the line that Tolkien says about the riddle game being important, he says this: Gollum knew, of course, that the riddle game was sacred and of immense antiquity, and even wicked creatures were afraid to cheat when they played at it.
Mm-hmm.
But Bilbo kind of turned the rules a little bit. So it's funny that but he accepts it, and so he accepts it.
That's what's so interesting is. So this is a really odd. I'll just call it what it is. I think it's a really odd situation for him to write in a book, and it has for me the remnants of the old fairy story in here, because and Tolkien downplays it. We'll dive in next week into the 1937 version, which gives us more hints about the nature of this riddle game and why it's so important to Gollum. But he never actually shows Gollum that Gollum was wrong about his pocket. Gollum makes 4 answers. He's supposed to have 1 to answer a riddle. Gollum asks for 3 answers because Bilbo is questioning.
So he's kind of breaking the rules of the sacred game too.
But it's sort of a like, you broke the rules, so now you have to agree that I can break the rules. And Bilbo agrees, and then Gollum guesses a 4. He guesses 4 things. He guesses hands. He guesses a knife. He guesses string, and he guesses nothing. In other words, Bilbo's got an empty pocket. Bilbo says they're all wrong. Gollum has lost, and he's very upset for having lost. And he never actually makes Bilbo show what he's got. Like there's this weird trust about this whole situation, which I find highly strange, and in some ways implausible, but implausible in the way that one might find it in an old children's fairy story, where there's just rules, and the rules are the person's going to tell the truth. In other words, the correlation to you have to follow the results of the riddle game. Like if you lose the riddle game, you have to do what you said. Is that when you're answering riddles, the person that your answer that has the riddle has to tell you the truth about what about your guess. Like, is your guess right or not? And it's just implied that he's going to tell the truth. And Gollum is so distraught over losing the riddle game, and yet he never forces Bilbo to show him okay, if I was wrong, then show me what you have got. Now he does get to that point once he's starting to guess that Bilbo has his ring, but he doesn't do it at first. He's just pissed off that he's lost the riddle game, and he doesn't show, like, make Bilbo show. Bilbo could just be lying. Like maybe he has, he has got a knife in his pocket and he's not telling the truth. How would you know? Well, of course he's going to tell the truth because it's the riddle game. I think that's the implication, and I find that very fascinating. It does tie with a lot of modern work that we hear on Jordan Peterson talks about this. Other people talk about the importance of play and games in the interaction between conscious minds. People, as human beings, we like to interact with each other, and we often do so in games of different sorts, which are essentially constructs of our imagination with rules. And in order to enforce those rules, a lot of times in these games, people just have to be agreeing that they're going to, hold themselves accountable, so that there's no outside force that's keeping them to the game. But that's the nature of play. And it's fascinating that even two adversaries, like Bilbo and Gollum, that Tolkien would imagine them to be engaged in a game which they both are going to hold to the rules of, weirdly. I mean, Gollum wants to murder him and maybe eat him at the beginning. But he doesn't, because he's not that hungry. So, but yet he's willing to engage in this game, this play with Bilbo that then has negative consequences for Gollum if he loses. But it's all understood that you're just going to adhere to the rules and no one's going to force you to. It's just odd.
Right. Even though Gollum does say it wasn't a fair question, not a riddle, Precious. No, but has he given up his right to make that claim since he started trying to answer it?
Exactly. Well, he did two things. He changed the parameters of his answer, so he gave himself more leeway, and Bilbo agreed to that. And then he started to answer. And so once you've done that, now Gollum has modified the rules of the game, but he's still in the game and bound by the game because Bilbo proposed an unfair question. Gollum then didn't respond by saying, nope, that's not right. Presumably Gollum could have said, that's not a riddle. Give me a real riddle or you've lost. But he didn't. He says, it's not fair, so now I get 3 guesses. And then he takes 4, and Bilbo accepts those 4, and they just all happen to be wrong. And so Gollum himself breaks the rules of the game by guessing 4, even his modified rules, but then he modifies the rules of the game. So they're still playing, and he's still bound by the rules because he's proposed a change to the rules, Bilbo's accepted, and then Gollum's played along. So now he's bound. And there is this sort of, I'm going to use a funny word. I mean, there is this sort of magic. There's this sort of force to this sacred. I mean, that's when we call something sacred, we say there's something beyond the natural about it. There's something beyond the ordinary and mundane about a thing when it's sacred. And so the fact that Tolkien elevates this game to that level is very fascinating.
Is there anything else like this in all of his stories where he brings in a game between adversaries, something else? This just popped in my head and I'm trying to think.
Well, I mean, there's more than this, right? There's the riddle game with Smaug as well. Where a kind of riddle game.
True.
So he does it again in this book where there's a verbal contest where he's trying to guess and like they're playing it. It's not as rigid as this one, but Smaug is trying to guess what he is and Bilbo's saying yes or no to that.
That's true.
So it's or where he's from. But it's interesting.
Huh.
I don't, let me think. In the Lord of the Rings, are there any riddles that people have to? There's plenty of poetry, and sometimes there's kinds of riddles in poetry, but I don't know that anyone.
The closest thing I would think of is Saruman's discussion with Gandalf at the Foot of Orthanc, right? When after he's been deposed, but it's not a game. It's a word.
They're verbally sparring with each other.
Yeah, that's a way of putting it. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Something that quickly popped in my head that I would have had time to research. I would have thought about it more. All right, so let's move on from the real game. Now that we know that it's unfair for both of them, I like how Bilbo does say he kind of turns the tables actually one more time, and he says when Gollum says it wasn't a fair question, not a riddle, he says, "Oh well, if it's a matter of ordinary questions, then I asked one first. What have you lost? Tell me that."
Exactly.
And so we immediately now get onto the ring.
Which is interesting because Gollum is insisting that he show what the answer to the riddle was. Bilbo basically says, "I don't have to do that. That's not part of the riddle game," which I find fascinating. But if it's just an ordinary question, we're answering ordinary questions. We're not in the riddle game, in other words, anymore. I got one for you. So he deflects, to try to see what Gollum's got. And this is our first. Then comes our first. Well, no, not then. Right before that is our first mention, I think, of Sauron. Do we have it? Have we had another mention of Sauron prior to this in the Hobbit?
I don't think so. Not as the Master. Not as an overarching
capital M
villain.
Master. He's not called Sauron. He's called the Master. And this is Gollum's thinking to himself at this point. My birthday present. It came to me on my birthday, my precious. So he had always said to himself. But who knows how Gollum came by that present ages ago in the old days when such rings were still at large in the world. Perhaps even the Master, capital M, who ruled them, could not have said. So he's referring to the ruler of the rings, which is the Lord of the Rings, the Master of the Rings. So that's Sauron. What I found fascinating is Tolkien is starting to give us an idea about the ring having basically a mind of its own of sorts in these passages. Why? Why do we say that? He says, Gollum used to wear it at first till it tired him, and then he kept it in a pouch next to his skin till it galled him. And by the way, I think that's the source of Gollum with clothes. Gollum thinks about what he's got, what he keeps in his own pockets to try to answer Bilbo's riddle. And it then says he carries a pouch from time to time. So Gollum does wear some rudimentary clothing of some type. You can't.
He's not a giant frog.
You got to have enough pants to have a pocket, so he's got to have even tattered shorts or something like that.
Right.
Like there's got to be something that he can keep in his pocket. So anyway, it's interesting to think about what it is.
Let me bring up a thing that I never thought about until this read through of The Hobbit is that it surprises me a little bit now that I'm reading through it, and this comes from the post Lord of the Rings perspective. Gollum would certainly have realized that the ring was lost because he when it wasn't close to his skin, right? He kept it in a pouch next to his skin till it galled him, and now usually hid it in a hole in a rock on the island, was always going back to look at it. How long had he lost this ring? Was it moments before Bilbo showed up? Was it hours? Was it a day? Because it's clear that the ring is always on his mind. And later in this chapter, we learn that even for the brief moment that Bilbo isn't wearing it, Bilbo has this sort of feeling of loss of the ring. And so I'm a little like he doesn't even know the ring is gone yet. And granted, you could say, well, he kept it in a hole under a rock on his island. But I feel like
I think we're giving clues, though, right? Okay, so here's the clues. When he first meets Bilbo, it says he isn't hungry because he's just eaten. Then later on, he thinks about the goblin that he just killed. And it says that he only wears the ring when he goes to kill goblins because, when he gets tired of what he's got eaten. Yeah. So he's thinking about the little squeaker that he wrung the neck of. And that implies that he has been out in the recent past, like in the last day maybe, with the ring, and he has to throttle a goblin, which he did indeed throttle and then eat. So maybe in the struggle, the ring pops off. And the ring does things itself. Like the ring comes off of Bilbo's finger after he leaps over Gollum and before he gets to the guard room of the goblins, which is why goblins see him at first, and then he puts the ring back on. And so I think that we're led to believe that the ring we're kind of given these hints. We're not told directly, but we're told the ring has a mind. We're given hints that the ring has a mind of its own because, first of all, it has a will that's different from Gollum's because it tires Gollum out. And even though it's the one thing he obsesses about, he doesn't even keep it on his person most of the time now. He keeps it on his island. And then it does things like it's always jumping on Bilbo's hand. And now it does say Bilbo tried to put it on. He slipped the cold ring over his finger when he escapes from Gollum. But then he doesn't try to put it on when he jams his hand in his pocket at the guard room. He's just shocked and he jams his hand in his pocket, which I've always thought was funny. He's like, why do you, like, that's your reaction in
jamming
fear?
In your pocket. Right.
He's jamming your hand in your pocket.
Yeah,
and then the ring just pops on and then he goes invisible, lucky for him, or he'd be dead. So in these cases, like the ring seems to have left Gollum. And I think that Jackson got it right. He had to tell the story in a much briefer version when he was doing Lord of the Rings, but the fact that it left Gollum is correct. And the fact that it does things like pop on and pop off of its own accord, whatever that means, is also, I think, accurate.
And I think we have to remember that it's really the second half of this chapter is very different from the original rendition of 1937 of The Hobbit,
which we're going to get into next time.
Which we're going to get next week. But so I want to say that when he wrote this and the ring was lost, it wasn't the ring of power, and he really only talks about that aspect of the ring and its desire and its anthropomorphization of what it wants and what it does only in the rewrite. And so it's really up to this point that we haven't had the ring do anything yet, because the ring is just lost. And so he wrote this not as a ring with a will of its own, or a ring that belonged to a master that had a greater purpose. Anyway,
that's cool.
Okay. So one other so the ring. All right, let's talk about the ring a little bit more. One of the things that the ring, he points out in the ring, that is never used again and completely ignored later in The Hobbit is that you can still see his shadow in the sunlight, and you don't have that anywhere else in the Lord of the Ring. Tolkien wrote this: with the ring you were invisible, only in the full sunlight could you be seen, and then only by your shadow, and that would be shaky and faint. And so it never comes up again in the Lord of the Rings. So he didn't edit that out, which was a little surprising.
Yeah, exactly. And then related to that is the second point I'm about to make, but it isn't going to sound like it at first, because I'm going to bring in light. So two instances of some interesting light, three instances. I mean, you brought up the first, which is that the full sunlight has the power to create a shadow on the ring bearer, even though it's a shaky shadow, which is an interesting thing if you think about it. Like, why is it shaky? Why is it thin? Something weird's going on there. But light comes from Gollum's eyes, fire, in fact, which is cool. It's also similar to another of the most famous poem in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, which is Beowulf. And Grendel's eyes are like flames when he goes into the hall to lay waste. And Gollum, it says, what has it got in his pockets? So this is Gollum recognizing that Bilbo has found the ring. He jumps to the answer, interestingly enough, like it's his suspicious nature. If you think about that, that's interesting as a side note, because it shows that the ring and Gollum are the same kind of creature. Like the ring deceives Gollum and falls off of him. So Gollum has become like the ring. And then it finds Bilbo, or Bilbo finds it. And then Gollum jumps to the answer of what, like, randomly, what has he got to, like, there's a world of things Bilbo could have in his pocket from his travels outside, but Gollum jumps to the correct answer because it's a kind of deceit, and the ring brings about the deceit, and so Gollum is in tune with the ring, and so he guesses correctly that it's, of course, the ring in Bilbo's pocket. The sound came hissing louder and sharper, and as he looked towards it, to his alarm, Bilbo now saw two small points of light peering at him. As suspicion grew in Gollum's mind, the light of his eyes burned with a pale flame. What have you lost? Bilbo persisted. But now the light in Gollum's eyes had become a green fire, and it was coming swiftly nearer. Okay, so we have things emitting light. So you have Gollum's eyes, and then Bilbo's sword, Sting, also emits light. Luckily, Bilbo falls on top of it when he trips and falls and puts the ring on. So Gollum speeds past him, doesn't see him. But as he gets up, it says he sheaths his sword because it's now emitting light, because probably the presence of goblins. What's fascinating to that, if you think about the mechanics of it, would Gollum be able to see the sword? I don't think so, because anything that Bilbo is holding or on him is invisible too. But he would definitely be able to see the light that's emitted by the sword. So there would have been a glow around nothing. So Bilbo sheaths his sword and puts it, in his scabbard, so the light can't be seen. So I found that to be fascinating. And then, of course, there's the whole issue of the light in the guard room. So Bilbo is seen by the guards, the goblin guards. And I know we haven't got there yet, but just to cover the light part of it.
Go for it.
But the light, in fact, works as his enemy, because they can see his shadow. So he puts the ring on in the guard room, and then there's this the one time where there is a sort of a slapstick moment where the goblins are, like, if you imagine the scene, the goblins are running around, like, yelling and crashing into things and searching, and invisible Bilbo is dodging them, trying to stay behind and stay hidden. He finally gets to the door, and squeezes through, but he gets stuck because the door is being pushed closed by a goblin, presumably. And as he's stuck in the door, the sunlight casts a shadow across from his body to the inside, and the goblins see the shadow, and they realize he's at the door, behind the door. I don't think they realize he's invisible yet, or at least that's not clear. It's just he's hidden in some way. They can't see him. And so anyway, so the light comes into play again. So a lot of themes of light throughout this.
And the light, going back to your comment about the light in his eyes, you could have named yourself Glip again, for instance. Here,
I should have done Grendel today.
You could have done Grendel, because the point's made that Grendel had an angry light in his eyes too. This is from Beowulf. The fiend stepped onto the many-colored paving of the floor, advanced in angry mood. From his eyes there came a horrible light, most like a flame. Exactly the same way that he describes Gollum. And so this is obviously right. Tolkien translated Beowulf and wrote his own version of it. So he was very familiar with that. And this goes to maybe the broader question that we touched a little bit on last week, is that Gollum is such a unique character with no comparison in any other that I can think of in any other work.
Exactly.
For it. But Grendel might be like one of the things that inspired part of him, and the anger and the coming in the darkness and living even right. Wasn't Grendel's mother in a cave, or was underground when he had to go fight Grendel's mother? Wasn't that all underground too? Yeah. Yes. So there is a distinct through line to perhaps the inspiration for parts of Gollum from Grendel, which was really surprising to me when I read through that.
Yep. Same here. I didn't realize the connection with well, I hadn't read it. So when I was younger and I read Beowulf, I remember that part about the pale fire in Gollum's eyes is very odd. It's very unique. And so when I read Beowulf when I was young, I had already read The Hobbit, and it actually struck me, the flame in Grendel's eyes reminded me of Gollum. And I didn't realize there was the connection at that point. I didn't even really think about Tolkien as a scholar. I just was a kid, so I liked the books.
I'm looking for my copy of Tolkien's Beowulf here on my shelf. I wanted to see if I can grab it real fast and find it.
I have it, probably it's in storage right now.
Yeah, I have it here somewhere too. Where did I put it? No, where is it?
So while you're looking for it, let me say one of the fascinating things about Gollum too, to speak of the uniqueness of Gollum, is he has conversations with himself. That's a kind of a cool. There we go. That's kind of a cool aspect of that adds to the uniqueness of Gollum, and again something that Peter Jackson captured really well. The cinematography, I thought, with Gollum in the marshes of the Dead Marshes and then into Mordor was fantastic. It was exactly like what Tolkien describes Gollum having a conversation with himself, not even just speaking his thoughts aloud, but talking to himself like he's another person. So it's the whole Slinker and Stinker, as Sam would put it, or Smeagol and Gollum, as some people put it. So he has two kind of personalities, one of which is more timid, and the other which is pretty much just a murderous creature, and one of which has some vestiges of humanity or hobbitry in him. Even to the point where at one point in this cave, so Gollum runs past Bilbo. He thinks Bilbo's on his way up, and he goes through this logical sort of sequence as to what Bilbo must have done, which I found to be kind of funny. But he's talking to himself in one voice and then the other. We guesses, precious, only guesses. We can't know till we find the nasty creature and squeezes it. It doesn't know what it's got in its pockets. But it doesn't know what the present can do, does it? It'll just keep it in its pockets. It doesn't know, and it can't go far. It's lost itself, the nasty nosy thing. It doesn't know the way out. It said so. It said so, yes, but it's tricksy. It doesn't say what it means. It won't say what it's got in its pockets is. It knows. It knows a way in. It must know a way out. Yes, it's off to the back door. To the back door. That's it. So Gollum, in contradiction to what's obvious, like Bilbo's obviously got clueless about this place, but Gollum has concluded that Bilbo is almost the kind of thing Gollum wishes he was. Like if Gollum had come into a mountain by himself and found his way down and found a treasure of a creature that went down there, he would have, in his own mind, he would have been the kind of thing that would sneak in. He would lie a lot, and then he would know a way out and know about the back door. And so he sort of turns Bilbo into this expansive, impressive thief and trickster, and then unwittingly leads Bilbo out while continuing to have conversations with himself. Then let's stop talking, Precious, and make haste. If the Baggins has gone that way, we must go quick and see. Go, not far now. Make haste. So he's giving commands to himself, which is hilarious. Again, one person. He has two. He's two people in one mind almost. And so that's kind of cool. And then I found the part about the pity of Bilbo, which Gandalf will allude to later, to be fascinating. But anyway, I didn't know if you wanted to bring up anything from Beowulf that you had looked up.
No, I couldn't find it. It's going to take too long. I need to have like a digital version to see how he points out Grendel. I'll look that up for next week. I like when the first time I read through The Hobbit, I didn't get, even the first few times I read through The Hobbit, I didn't really get that he was speaking to himself back and forth as much as you do now. Even through the films, it's a little more obvious that because they make it so clear it's two different voices. And in the books, when you're reading it, he doesn't say he was of two minds and he was a multiple personality, right? You have to infer that from how he's writing it. But here he does it too, because he actually creates separate paragraphs for each voice. So it's not like he's talking in one train of thought. There is an actual separation between it. It's like two different voices speaking there. And I only noticed that this time when I read through it, that, okay, he is making the point very clearly through how he's writing it. And the only way that he could, without saying straightforward, another voice was in his head speaking to him by actually creating two separate voices.
Yeah. We aren't led by the nose, but I think it's pretty clear. I like your point about the separation of paragraphs, but he also comes to conclusions and then challenges those conclusions in the next paragraph with the next voice. And then he'll say things like, the goblins will catch it. It can't get out that way, Precious. Like he's talking, he's using a word about like as if he's speaking to a person. And then the next line is Gollum. Goblins is yes, but if it's got the present, our precious present, then goblins will get it. Gollum. They'll find it. They'll find out what it does. So it's very clear that Gollum is talking back and forth. Now we do have sometimes that inner monologue in our minds where we talk to ourselves, but this is out loud. Different voices. One voice uses Gollum, the other voice uses Precious when it's talking back and forth. It's pretty interesting. Like Tolkien is really doing some putting the work in to give us a character that's very unique.
Yeah. The voice of Gollum. So here's one thing I dove into this week and I couldn't find an answer to it. In that, if you have the Kindle version of The Hobbit, it has Tolkien reading part of Riddles in the Dark to you, and he has a voice for Gollum, which is what Andy Serkis really went off of. And I was like, okay, where did he get this voice from? Where did he get that? Was that an inspiration, or was that just something completely out of his head? As far as I can tell, there is the voice of Gollum, the way that he does it for the readers when he reads it, is completely new. There is nothing else that you could say like, oh, he was inspired by this character in Andrew Lang's Green Fairy Tale book, right? It is completely new. There is nothing else here. He had it whole cloth, the voice of Gollum and how he spoke, his idiosyncrasies of saying Precious and Gollum. Maybe that was from something he experienced and during World War I. I don't know, but there is nothing I could find. There is nowhere anywhere else. Maybe I totally missed it and I didn't search for the right stuff. And in my research in the Middle Earth Companion books by Christina Skull and I can't remember the other name. Anyway, but yeah, I couldn't find it. So for those of you who say like, oh well, you guys are always pointing out the places where he's, the riddles came from Anglo-Saxon and Gollum was inspired by Grendel. No, Gollum was completely made up by Tolkien out of the amazing mind that he had, the amazing imagination, and to say otherwise would not be true. So we're not trying to denigrate things when we say that Tolkien was inspired to write things like, for instance, The Ring. We can bring up The Ring again. I did not realize The Ring had a grand history going all the way back to Plato, an invisibility ring, and all the way up through what was it? Andrew Lang's story in the Green Fairy book, The Enchanted Ring. So that's thousands of years.
Both the green and yellow fairy book.
Green and yellow. Yeah. So that was thousands of years of invisibility rings. This is something that is well established. And so Tolkien used that as a central point in there because he was so well versed in it. It made sense to make that a central part because
again, it was pretty cool.
Kind of bring in all the things that he had.
Yeah. My undergraduate, when I read The Republic, I remember that part. I remember like the man reading about the magic ring. I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. I didn't realize that. I never realized that it was that ancient. So we're talking 300s BC with Socrates and Plato, and it's an old idea. This thing. I completely agree with you about Gollum. Just because we can find elements like. A couple times when his eyes shine with a pale fire, we're like, oh, that's from Grendel. That doesn't mean Grendel is Gollum. Gollum is entirely different from Grendel's a literal monster, and Tolkien insists that Gollum is actually not a monster. And to emphasize the point that Gollum's not a monster, we have the key critical moment where the pity of Bilbo ruled the fate of many, as Gandalf will later say.
Yes.
So here we are in the passage. Gollum has figured out that he doesn't want to go any further. He's too close to the surface. He doesn't want to get caught, especially now that he doesn't have his magic ring. And he's figured out that Bilbo's nearby, so he's figured that Bilbo probably followed him, and he's snuffling on the ground. He's tensed like a bowstring, ready to jump towards Bilbo if Bilbo shows himself in any way through sound. And it says, and Tolkien is writing about Bilbo's reaction because Bilbo's desperate. He's got to get past Gollum in the passage to get out, but he can't, or at least he thinks he can't at first. Bilbo almost stopped breathing and went stiff himself. He was desperate. He must get away out of this horrible darkness while he had any strength left. He must fight. He must stab the foul thing, put its eyes out, kill it. It meant to kill him. No, not a fair fight. He was invisible now. Gollum had no sword. Gollum had not actually threatened to kill him or tried to yet, and he was miserable, alone, lost. That he, by the way, is Gollum, that Bilbo's thinking about. Gollum is miserable, alone, lost. A sudden understanding, a pity mixed with horror, welled up in Bilbo's heart. A glimpse of endless unmarked days without light, there's light again, or hope of betterment. Hard stone, cold fish, sneaking and whispering. All these thoughts passed in a flash of a second. He trembled. And then quite suddenly, in another flash, as if lifted up by a new strength and resolve, he leaped. And he leaps over Gollum. I have things to say about that too. But this pity is fantastic. There's so much in that passage I read. Here's what I mean. Bilbo's desperate. People nowadays in that kind of state would say, Gollum clearly means to kill him, so he should just stab him. He's a kind of monster. He should kill him and leave. Bilbo makes the decision not to, starting with the no, not a fair fight. So the idea, which, by the way, this is a very Western idea, the idea that of commensurate force, for example, like you're not allowed to use mortal force unless mortal force has been used against you or attempted to be used against you. Very modern Western idea. So which is a tradition that Bilbo is obviously firmly part of, even though he's part of Middle-earth. And then pity. So first, it's not fair. I can't kill him because it's not a fair fight. So the idea is it would have to be a fair fight somehow. And then I can't kill him because pity. And why pity? Because he empathizes with Gollum. He literally puts himself in his place and tries to imagine Gollum's life over the ages and how horrible it is. And then there comes this final moment, which I think is really cool, which says, and then quite suddenly in another flash, as if lifted by a new strength and resolve, he leaped. I see this as, this is kind of almost the hand of chance or fate, if chance or fate you call it. bolstering Bilbo because it brings pity in, and pity and mercy are the domain of Eru Ilúvatar. Like this is a thing which I think what we have here is Bilbo being inspired, and then I think that because it comes in a flash and he resolves to do something new and he jumps. And let's look at the jump for a second. No great leap for a man, but a leap in the dark. Straight over Gollum's head he jumped, 7 feet forward and 3 in the air. Indeed, had he known it, he only just missed cracking his skull on the low arch of the passage. Tolkien's deflecting there. Hobbits are about 3.5 feet tall, says Tolkien. To jump 7 feet forward is like me doing a standing leap of 12 to 13 feet. And 6 feet in the air because I'm 6'1". So that's an incredible jump. Like I can't do it. I can't do a jump like that. I can't jump 12 feet standing straight because it doesn't say he went off at a run. It just said he leaped. He's right in front of Gollum. He's invisible. He just leaps straight over Gollum. That's impressive for something and it's almost supernaturally impressive for something like him. Anyway, what do you think?
I think so. Here's what I think. I don't really have much to say about the leap, but yes, it is impressive. My take on it, I had highlighted. When I read this time through the Hobbit, I had highlighted the whole pity part of it, but the phrase that I think makes it that brings it home, so to speak, the phrase that makes it real is just the 2 words, he trembled, because he explains all the things that Gollum had, right? A sudden understanding of pity mixed with horror welled up in Bilbo's heart, a glimpse of endless unmarked days without light or hope or betterment heart. So he can identify with this. And the trembling is him going like, that could be me. Like that, like what a horrible life to lead. The fear, the trembling, like the pity all mixed together in a phrase, he trembled. And so that stuck with me this time. And it's after he trembled that he had the resolve, like, this is not going to happen. I'm not going to sit back and let this happen to me now because of, I mean, he's a bad guy, Gollum, right? But he has pity for him. But I'm still, the trembling, the fear, the resolve all came in that moment. So I don't know. That's the one phrase that stuck out to me this time. That he trembled with it. Without that phrase, you don't get an understanding of like he had a physical, emotional, spiritual, almost reaction to the way he thinks of Gollum.
Right. And it's true pity. Like and honestly, it's not a delusion. Gollum is a truly pitiable creature. It is true, and we're going to find out later that he's murderous to the core. He eats children, like he kills and eats children. He's a horrible creature. But the world is not. This is what gives the lie. So many things in Tolkien give the lie to the tired, stupid, old attitude that Tolkien is too black and white. That was like one of the his character of Gollum is a great example. There is so much nuance to Gollum. There's so much depth for a creature that could just be easily dismissed as a psychopathic monster. And Tolkien leans into that.
And I think Tolkien makes that point in the last thing we hear from Gollum when he says, all at once there came a blood-curdling shriek. This is after Bilbo had jumped over him. Filled with hatred and despair, Gollum was defeated. He dared go no further. He had lost his prey, and lost too the only thing he had ever cared for, his precious. The cry brought Bilbo's heart to his mouth, but still he held on, now faint as an echo, but menacing the voice behind. The cry did not strike fear, terror, utter disaster into his heart. It brought his heart to his mouth. This is when you're like, you feel for somebody. You don't have like, when you feel an empty pit in your stomach, that's when there's fear. When you feel that your heart is beating very fast, but not when your heart comes into your mouth. That's pity again. And I like the way that he puts that. He didn't say he felt pity for him after the shriek, but it brought his heart into his mouth. And I think that's the last thing we have of feeling.
That's Tolkien, master of prose. Yes, like he's so good at using other ways to tell you things and bring an emotional or beautiful or ugly scene to life with his prose.
Yeah.
So that's the end of that section, that subsection that I talked about. So we're on to the final one now, where he and we're back to just sort of this. There's no more psychological drama with Gollum. Now we've transitioned back to the adventure. So now we're in adventure mode, and he's got to get out. I mentioned before like he has the ring on as he jumps over Gollum, but somehow the ring comes off again between that and when he gets to the end of the passage and goes into the guard room. Because as he steps in the guard room, he's not invisible anymore. The goblins see him,
right?
But we're firmly back in adventure mode. So with one hint that the ring can do as it wishes and has a will other than its master. And then Bilbo, in fear, jams his hands in his pockets, which I still find odd. I just don't like. I can't imagine a situation where I would jam when confronted with something really scary, I would jam my hands in my pockets. I can imagine situations where I would freeze in fear, run in fear, attack in fear, but fight, flight, or freeze. But I guess it's a freeze reaction. But hands in pockets is an interesting one. But anyway, that's what he does, and the ring pops.
He's looking for his pipe. That's what he wants. He wants comfort. So he's looking for his pipe in his pocket once more.
There we go. While you're being charged by a bunch of goblins in full armor. So
yeah, right.
So anyway, then we get the circus scene where the goblins are running around their guard room, smashing things, searching things, and Bilbo's dodging them as an invisible hobbit back and forth and trying to get to the door, and he does so, and then gets stuck, and then with one mighty effort bursts through, and all of his brass buttons go off everywhere, which the goblins then collected. There's a fun side note. Speaking of games, I know that I bring this up every once in a while, maybe every episode I bring up Lotro because I think it's cool. But in Lotro, one of the deeds you can do, you can go back to Goblin Town. Goblin Town, is in the Misty Mountains, and there's a bunch of quests and stuff. But one of the deeds that you can do is go find all 22 of Bilbo's brass buttons that are 23.
That's awesome.
Which because it said the goblins picked them up, so you have to go around Goblin Town. They're scattered in different places, and so it's carried there by the goblins after they. So anyway,
it's funny in reading this here again. I was struck that in The Hobbit by Peter Jackson, the first one, what is it? An Unexpected Journey? Is that what he called it? Yeah. They add all this goblin stuff, falling down, sliding down mountain or interior like cliffs and leaping over things and cutting bridges that then swing across and jump to. I'm just so much. What do they cut out at the end is the goblins at the gate and Bilbo's leap. I'm just like, what are you doing with this here? You had a moment for Gollum for Bilbo to make a name for himself outside of Gollum, but also to make him name for himself when he's overcoming his fear of the goblins. And I think he totally missed out on that. Reading this through, I'm sort of flabbergasted that they decided that was the point to cut it. What they could have done is they could have had him leap over Gollum, cut back to the dwarves at some point, and then cut back to Bilbo getting out through the gate. I mean, even his leap in the movie is actually, he leaps and he kind of clocks him in the head. At least I think if I remember that right. And it's not a great leap. And I think he's holding his sword at him, like about to like slice him, and decides not to. And I guess you have to do that because you can't say what's in his head. You can't have him narrate the voice in his head that Tolkien is able to do in the book. But I don't know, that scene was one of my first great moments of disappointment in the book when it comes to Bilbo's character and Gollum's character and how they portrayed him right there. So anyway, not to bring that movie up. I don't really want to.
Well, I mean, you could have had, like you said, there's different ways to do it cinematically. You could have seen like Bilbo could have drawn his sword and been about to come at Gollum and stab him, and then he stops and looks at him, and we see Gollum piteous. Like you could have a piteous shot of Gollum, just this weeping creature, and you could see Bilbo's head flash to memories. You could do like a flip book flash of like 3 seconds of all these, like he gets like this vision almost of Gollum's life. So I've seen movies that do that in scenes, like psychological moments where the character gets a flash of a bunch of images from another source or from their own memory or whatever. And they could have done that, and that could have shown. And then he sort of drops the sword, not drops it on the ground, but puts it down or puts it back. Following that, and then we see him leap. So you could have seen that a moment of inspiration where he changes his mind from slaying Gollum to having pity. Could have done a lot of things. And then the fact they cut out, you know, when you were talking about the whole idiot Rube Goldberg scene of the dwarves and Gandalf and Bilbo running through the Misty Mountains, followed by a bunch of circus animals in form of goblins. There was an element, a kind of Three Stooges slapstick element that I always pictured to the goblins doing that kind of thing in the guard room, where Bilbo's like just dodging out of the way, or they're running around, moving things, breaking things, yelling, screaming. There's like a pandemonium, and Bilbo's just managing to stay ahead. And he it even describes a scene where he like goes through one of their legs, actually. It says, the place was full of goblins running about, and the poor little hobbit dodged this way and that, was knocked over by a goblin who could not make out what he bumped into, scrambled away on all fours, slipped between the legs of the captain just in time, got up and ran for the door. Like, they could have still had their slapstick moment. Like, this is a perfect scene for that. But they decided to do this idiot thing with all the dwarves and Gandalf. Anyway,
on the idiot thing, we're gonna have to shut this episode down.
Cut it off. Shut it down.
So next week we're gonna go over the differences, and they are monumental, between the 1937 edition and the 1950 whatever. I can't remember when he republished it. He rewrote apparently 1947, 51. Okay, and so we'll go over all those differences. It's really in birthday present versus giving it to him versus Bilbo stumbling on it. So we'll talk about that. If you want our extended edition, go to theonewing.com/member or theonewing.com/Patreon. You can get that. We're going to talk about what makes Bilbo an adventurer. I'm going to bring that up with Michael. We'll talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about War of the Rohirrim predictions. We'll in 2 episodes, you'll hear us do that. And again, hey guys, Michael needs a lapel mic. You probably heard it. The audio isn't great this episode. So we're going to find the best one out there and not buy it, but find the closest one to that. That's not going to
That's right. All right, freeloaders.